going to talk about SharePoint. When I had my first meeting with Bill, he came in and we discussed how we can bring to the faculty and staff the advantages or changes that would come down in SharePoint as compared to Google Drive. He's going to talk about that, but I realized Bill's sort of a magician as well in terms of that he went into my laptop, did something, and Okta was working. So I was like, hey, you know Okta so well. He works with Okta, so he decided to help us, and he says, I'm ready to jump in front of the bus and sort out all your Okta queries.
Oh yeah, I said that.
How this amazing product is helping all of us. So he's going to explain to us how it works. And if you have any questions regarding Okta, SharePoint, Google Drives, he's here for us. Thanks, Will.
Good. All right. Hi, I don't know most of you. I know some of you. Bill Blaze, ITS. I'm the software trainer. Let me first start with just questions. Does anybody have like specific questions that they want to make sure that we are answered before I get going?
Is Google going away?
I don't get to make those decisions. The official answer has not been decided at this time. UNE, so for those of you who are here several years, UNE went from the Novell experience to the Google experience, and then from the Google experience to the Office experience. And thank you all for spreading all across the room. The transition was intended that eventually the Google account would go away because that creates a kind of a dual world that you're living in. But for a few years, that was the place of choice of the only option. The decision has not been made. When that decision has been made, it will be communicated and supported, and plan will be provided. So I don't have any specific true answers to that. As soon as I know, I will let you know. But yeah. Apart from that, the unspoken question, then why are we having this conversation if Google is not officially going away? Because in my personal opinion, it's going to. We're paying for the Microsoft environment, for a number of reasons, but first and foremost because of the security. So the Microsoft environment provides a higher level of security with the service provision that we have. So at its core, it comes down to the security question. Also, we're paying for it, so we're invested in it, right? So that's very likely to be the direction we're going to go. So I can't say that with 100% certainty, but that's the understanding. So the sooner you make the transition, the easier that time will be. Makes sense? Okay, so I was going to start with kind of a more general concept, more general discussion of the Google environment versus the Microsoft environment. Oh, yeah. I've never been in this room. Okay. Can anybody tell me what they think the difference between Google and Microsoft is? And yes, all comments are welcome, but you are being recorded. So nobody volunteered. The short version that most people like to think, the common interpretation is that Google is easy and Microsoft is hard. And Google is new and Microsoft is old. And there's a lot packed into those things, and I'm not going to debate all of those points. But hopefully this will clarify that it's not quite as simple, and it's not for that. So so I'll start with the similarities. The most common things that most people use are accessing their files. So you can access your Microsoft Office environment content from the same anywhere with an internet, just like you can from Google. It's using the same UNE logon info. It's all the same consistent experience. You can share your content with anyone at the UNE with a UNE at une.edu account. Students, staff, faculty, alumni, anybody who has an active account, you can share it just as you would in either situation. You can also share your content with anyone outside of the UNE experience. There's an asterisk there because it depends on where you put your content, what that content is, what rights you have to that content. But functionally at its core, you still have that full range of access. That comes down to one big difference between the Google sharing experience and the Microsoft sharing experience. So when you share content with somebody else from your Google account, you just put in their email address and you send it and they get access to it because most people already have a Google account. But you have to have a Google account to share content. There are exceptions now that you can make to that to make it truly anonymous, but if you're sharing files and working on them or providing people view access, edit access, they still have to have a Google account to do so. But because most people already have a Google account, it's not considered a burden, an extra hurdle. Microsoft functions in the exact same way. Anybody who has a Microsoft or a Microsoft family of accounts, Hotmail, Live, Microsoft, etc., they can access the content in the same way as long as they're using that account. But not as many people have a Microsoft account to begin with. Many people do, they just don't realize it. They have it through these other home accounts, but not from their professional environment. So it appears as an extra burden. It's technically not, but it does have that extra process. So if you share something with someone who is outside the UNE account, when they get the link and they follow the link to get it, it will just prompt them to log in with a Microsoft account. And they can use whichever Microsoft account they have, and they will be brought right through. If they don't have one, you sign up, you create one, it takes 30 seconds, and you've got access to more than you can shake a stick at. But that's that kind of asterisk for this one. And for all of the content, you have the same. You have live and asynchronous editing abilities, so people can co-edit at the same time, either at the same time or in asynchronous time frames. So you still have that. How you implement that, how each service implements that is very different, but the functionality is the same. So you can have multiple people editing the same document at the same time, or over different periods of time, and you can see a history of that, but how they implement them is different. So what are the core differences? For me, it's the easiest way to think about it is to think about how they were born. So Google was born in the age of the internet, and Microsoft was born in the age of desktops and business environments. And if you think about that, if you keep that in mind, it does inform how most of the other services are impacted. So I say internet/social because these are designed to be person-to-person contacts for Google. It was originally about connecting to individuals, one-to-one, one-to-one, one-to-one. And you could have one to many, but you'd have to make all those connections. But it's person to person. Whereas in Microsoft, because it starts from a business environment, it's expecting an organizational structure, a hierarchy, that kind of thing, and role-based permissionings. One of the big differences when you share, for example, in Google, if you want to share one file with 10 people, you put those 10 emails, 10 accounts in, and you share that file. If you want to share 10 files with 10 people, you do the same thing. A new person comes on, you have to share those 10 files with that new account. In the Microsoft environment, that person would presumably have a role in your organization or in your SharePoint intranet or something like that as a group. And just by becoming a member of said thing, SharePoint site or a group, they would automatically get access to all of the files underneath, so they wouldn't have to be individually managed. And that's where the kind of conversation about having the Pharmacy SharePoint site environment would be, I think, the most helpful and most impactful for you folks. That it would drastically reduce the amount of worrying about who has connections and making sure you have the latest version, et cetera, et cetera.
Can I ask you a question
Yes,
about that?
absolutely.
A lot of times when I use Google Drive, I'm not sharing necessarily to a discrete group of people, but I'm sharing via a link.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an ability to do that with SharePoint?
Yep, the same. They share via link, share via individuals, or share by roles, which is something that is distinct to the Microsoft environment. But yes, you can share with a link, make it accessible to anybody with a link, which is the same.
Internal or external?
So the external still requires that Microsoft account for them to access, right? So you're still hitting that hurdle of the Google. Everybody has a Google account already. Microsoft, you have to have a Google account, but you can still provide it with a link.
Okay, and it doesn't have to be .edu, like they can set it up and then they'll do it.
They can set it up.
Like if somebody gets that link and they have their prompt to log in, they can just create one.
Correct, yes, it doesn't, yes, if they're outside UNE, they won't have an edu, a une.edu. They would create whatever or have one of their own private ones. Yep. The this is kind of a simplification, but Google is primarily form-focused. That's its initial reaction, initial approach to things, and Microsoft is primarily functionality-focused. And this is, as I said, an oversimplification. But, for example, looking at the productivity suite, Google is an incredible innovator and powerful tool. And I will step back and just point out that I'm not a fanboy of either particular one. Both of these are tools. They're used very effectively in different ways. UNE is going in the Microsoft environment way, so that's why we're pushing that. The form focus. Google did not say, we're going to build a text editing document creation tool. They looked at the Microsoft environment and said 90% of people use 10% of that tool. We're going to take that 10% and we're going to make it work for our environment, and we're going to make it work easier. Like, that was their approach. The approach is, how can we make these things easy for people to use? Whereas Microsoft has 30, 40, 50 years in the investment in that tool, and they continue to add functionality to that tool, so it is incredibly, for example, Word or Excel has an incredible array of powerful features that 90% of people only use 10% of. But any one person who has that app can do all of those things in it. Whereas in Google, if you want to do anything that's beyond that 10 to 20% of functionality, you have to either code it yourself or get a third-party app or do something like that. So that's the kind of difference there for that. Obviously, Google kind of requires the internet. Technically speaking, it doesn't. You can have offline forms and content and that kind of thing, but it's built for the internet. It doesn't. There's no desktop app of Google Docs or Sheets or Slides or anything like that. Whereas Microsoft doesn't require the internet. You have a desktop version of these tools, but if you want to use that sharing and the other consecutive collaboration tools, you do actually have to use the internet at some point, whether it's in the moment or on a sync basis. Google's approach to the apps is that each of those apps is a standalone tool that can be used in and of itself without being necessarily tied to all of the others. And because of that, they aren't inherently connected. They don't tie as tightly as the Microsoft environment, which was built particularly for that collaborative co-use tool functionality. That in the integration, much of that functionality you can leverage one tool into another tool, which I'll use as an example, Microsoft Teams or Groups, where they're tying these various things together. Now, asterisks on both of those. So there is connection, obviously, in the Google environment between their various tools. It knows who you are and it can connect things, mail to calendar, for example, and tasks and things like that. And Microsoft's integration goes only so far. There are certain things which were built originally as standalone things, such as Microsoft Forms, which is Microsoft's parallel to Google Forms. It was built as a standalone piece that was then integrated, so the integration isn't as inborn. Because it's built so that individuals can use those things. So there's asterisks, there's caveats to all of these, but these are general guidelines. Finally, security. So in Google, Google is not FERPA compliant and is not HIPAA compliant. So these are the big things. And as I mentioned before, Microsoft, UNE's account with Microsoft is FERPA compliant. It is not, however, HIPAA compliant. So how many of you are using HIPAA compliant information? Occasionally, even. Occasionally, yeah, from time to time. So the thing about this is that emails, the Zix platform provides the compliance and things, and communications within UNE are still secure for email, but it's not on SharePoint sites or Drive where you should be keeping that HIPAA information. That being said, the dental program is currently piloting Box service, Box.com, which is another online repository, which provides, which our contract with them gives HIPAA compliance. So HIPAA compliant content can live there. And it's just another file repository. It can take whatever files you want to put there. Assuming all goes well with the dental pilot, which all indications are, that will likely be rolled out as a larger group. But for right now, it's currently just a dental environment.
So you're saying after SharePoint, we'll go to that thing?
No, so good. So it's literally just HIPAA compliant file content. So it's not a Power Suite. It doesn't have its own Word documents. It's not Excel. It doesn't have any of that. It's just a place to put files that are HIPAA compliant, so that people you can give access to people so that they can see it, and it's restricted to the technical requirements of HIPAA. To be clear, the Microsoft environment is technically HIPAA compliant. It has all of the technical necessary elements that provide it. We just do not have it in our contract with them to have that compliance as an official part of the contract. So we went with thebox.com for that. So ultimately what that would be is in the tiles from your desktop, probably, assuming this goes well, from the tiles where you see OneDrive and Word and Excel from online, there would probably be another box element so you could get to it there because it can be integrated into the Microsoft environment. Questions so far? So looking at the productivity in quotes because that's an oversimplification, but what most people are using for, so the Office Suite plus some other stuff. So as you know, so Outlook parallels Mail, Calendar, Docs is Word, Sheets, Excel, etc. All of these are parallel. So the Google Drive is similar to the Microsoft OneDrive, Microsoft and the Google Forms. Microsoft Forms is basically a clone of Google Forms minus the file attachments. We'll get into that. Hangouts, Meet, the video chat and messaging tools are Skype for Business, which is actually end of life in 2021 and is being replaced by Teams. So that's what that functionality is for. Google Sites, the classic Google Sites, is, do you folks have a Google site? Yes, yes. All right, so and it's the classic structure. So what that means is it's HTML based and it's not mobile friendly, and so those sites are managed under the UNE account. If, and this is a big danger point, this is one of those classic things, so what I mentioned about security, this Google Sites, if you choose to upgrade an existing classic site from your, that's under an @une.edu account to the modern sites, happen like that, suddenly mobile friendly, and UNE has no oversight to that. So if anything happens to that site, we can't touch it and Google can't touch it. So if, for example, you upgrade that site to Google Sites and then the person who's controlling that site, say there's one owner, quits, leaves, whatever, struck by the lottery, as my boss likes to say, and goes, that person's account is inaccessible. There's no way for UNE to get access to that, because Google has separated that from all of the other services, and they don't even have access. They say that they can't even look inside and can't touch it. So that's a big danger point, and that's one of those kind of flexibility features that Google likes to put in. You can do these things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So that's one of those danger points. SharePoint site, the equivalent, provides the modern friendly, both the classic approach and the modern site design, so that you can have that, and because it's managed entirely within the Microsoft environment, we have access and ways to get into that if terrible things were to happen. For instance. YouTube is on the Google side. Microsoft Stream is Microsoft's approach to YouTube. It's institution-specific, organization-specific video sharing, and it has the same basic features: play, stream. It does audio captioning, what's that word? Transcription, and short links and things like that. It's still building up. It launched last year to public, and still building up some other features like playlists and some organizational structures that are nice to have, but they are continuing to work on that. The other big difference between YouTube and Stream is that YouTube you can make visible to the world. Stream is not possible. Yeah, it's only available for accounts within une.edu. So even if they had a Microsoft account, they wouldn't be able to see the Microsoft Stream content. That being said, Microsoft has put on their timeline for Q2 2020, so early next year, to launch the ability to make those things visible for external audiences. Yes.
One feature that I feel like is missing on Stream, I don't know if it's on their product line, is playback speed.
It's there.
Is it? I haven't been
It's kind of buried in the bottom right-hand corner. You click the options, and then you can change the playback. Yeah.
Like 1.5 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, 'cause
1.15, 1.2. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And that's another one of those things. Is again, the UI is not the first priority for the Microsoft teams, and not that it's not on their target, but the focus is on getting the functionality up there, and then the UI usually comes after. Which actually brings me to a good point about both of these. We are in the cloud now. for the vast majority of this content, and the cloud is the future, whether or not that's a good thing. That's what's happening. And the downside, the primary downside to being in the cloud is that the tools and feature sets can change in a moment's notice. And that has nothing to do with how UNE wants to do it or desires to do it. Microsoft desires or Google desires, we're going to redesign mail. Haha. Poof, there it is, and you don't get another choice. So there's those. So a lot of the features and the conversations, not a lot, some of them will change. For example, this morning while I was just preparing, I noticed that I think over the weekend, Microsoft added back the ability to create their light Visio, Microsoft Visio diagrams is now available in OneDrive. It was there a year and a half ago, and then it went away because they tried to get everybody to pay for it. And now it seems to be back. So that kind of thing happens from time to time, unfortunately. And that's not just Microsoft, that's all of these tools.
Are all these fully available right now?
Yes, yes.
Because I'm on the site trying to do things, and it's just flag, like it's not doing very well. Is that
When you say trying to do things,
trying to create a site, for instance?
you can't create your own SharePoint sites, and you can't create your own SharePoint groups or teams. And why is that? That's because the oversight UNE has decided to restrict the on-demand features because when it was initially launched, everybody created 1,000 of them. There's about 4,000 or 5,000 individual SharePoint sites that nobody uses anymore, and the oversight of that is in the Microsoft admin panel is limited. So it's just a request. Email the help desk. There's also sign-up request forms available on the website, the its.une.edu. And it's usually a 1 or 2 day turnaround and a training, especially for first-time SharePoint folks or teams or groups folks. So those can be done. It's not intended as an obstacle, more as it got way out of control and we need to kind of get a hold of it better. Productivity gaps. So there's, of the kind of default bundle of things that are available in Google, the other thing that is available in Google that is not available in Microsoft from the UNE suite is the maps and ability to edit, create, customize your own maps. In the UNE account, that's not the same. Microsoft, however, separately provides access to Microsoft Access, but only for Windows devices. OneNote, Planner, Sway, SharePoint Forms, which is a different version of online files, online forms. Microsoft Flow, Power Apps, Power BI. There's a number of additional tools. So OneNote, everybody familiar with OneNote? Not familiar? No? Okay. Basically a combination of a Scratchpad and a Word document. It's an oversimplification. Planner is, anybody use Trello or other Kanban card style planning tools? So you can create cards and for a group or a team, so assign tasks, assign it to people, attach documents, put dates on them, get reminders, charts, that kind of thing. It is not a full Microsoft project with Gantt charts and that kind of thing, but it can provide you a good organizational structure and some scheduling. Sway is kind of a hybrid between a video and a PowerPoint, and they are available as well. You can convert your PowerPoints into Sways. SharePoint forms are based on SharePoint sites, the lists in SharePoint sites, so you can have customized forms which provide, instead of just these are the questions, you can provide logic behind them. So if you select this and that, and you're this person and that person, you can provide all of these other functionalities. These things, both Flow and Power Apps, are connected to those, and they, while technically available, we do provide some basic training. These are things that the individuals who use them are responsible for developing. ITS does not provide development. We provide the basic training on how to use the tools, but the development and support and maintenance is up to you folks, or to the folks who decide to implement them. What is Flow? Has anybody used Flow or heard of Flow? Not you. You don't count, Gene. Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, do you want to share? What is it?
No, I'll
Oh, come on! So everybody's familiar with mail rules. If I get an email from Bill, put it in this subfolder. If I get an email with the subject line blah, put it in that, whatever. So that's basically an if-then-else clause. If this, then that, else do the other thing. And Microsoft Flow is that, but for the entire Office 365 experience. So if somebody submits a new form, then send these 3 people a notification and add a new version of the Word file into a subfolder on our SharePoint site and publish on Twitter that forms is awesome. But yes, it's all of those things. It can be as powerful or as simple as you want it to be, and it integrates and it functions off of, and this is a sales speech, sorry. It functions off of that integrated environment, which is not something that is, because of that integrated environment, it can do these things. That's not something that is available in the Google experience. Whether you use it or not is entirely up to you. Power Apps is a glorified form builder, form editor, so you can make it much more customized than the simple scroll down each question. You can create layers and flyouts and animations and things like that for forms to make them more dynamic and more aware. Because one of the things about forms is, SharePoint forms, is that we already know who you are because you've signed in. So we can know other things about you. We don't have to ask you for your name or your email address because you already have that information. And based on that information, you can do other things. We have some folks who, using Flow, that whenever they get a submission of a form, if because it already knows who they are, it checks their last name, and if the last name is between here and here, it goes to one person. If the last name is between here and there, it goes to another person. So you can set up a number of variations there. Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence, BI business intelligence. So it's a reporting tool or a visualization tool for data, whether it's your SharePoint data or you can upload content from Excel or other data points and provide dashboards and things like that. So there's a number of other things. Yes, that did sound like a sales tool. It is kind of. There are a number of powerful options in here, but the key to remember is that those are, while we provide the basic training, we do not support the development thereof. So that's kind of the basics of the differences and similarities. Does anybody have any? Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. I wasn't looking over here far enough.
Question. So, Microsoft have another product way more popular. It's called GitHub. Why? This GitHub is very popular in the West Coast and also in the high-tech company.
Yep. Yep.
So why we don't using that? It's completely free for everybody. And I don't know about SharePoint, but I know at least Google you provide free for 15 gigabytes. Mm-hmm. And GitHub is completely free for, especially for poor students.
Yeah.
And that would be really attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And why we don't?
All right. So that's a bigger Microsoft question. So you're talking about GitHub in the file the development repository. That is, I don't have an answer. That's an inside, and these are the things about bigger organizations. They make the decisions they make because they make them, not necessarily because people want or need or have asked for a thing. So I don't have a good answer on why they don't have that, why that's not integrated into part of this. I totally agree, especially for certain of those. That can be a very powerful tool, but unfortunately no. Yeah. Did I miss? Oh, I did. Sorry, I forgot to mention this groups. Google came out last year, a year and a half ago, with this groups functionality to kind of integrate multiple people working on a particular project together, so you could share it with a group rather than the individuals. That functionality is not part of UNE's account contract with Google, so we don't have access to that. This is one of, in my experience, one of those interesting places where Google went and tried to copy a Microsoft thing, which was kind of interesting to see that happen. Yes?
The Microsoft Groups for Mac users, it works on the online 365 that you can see it, but you cannot see it in the Outlook platform for the Mac. Personally, I approached IDS to see it, and IDS could not identify how it can be, but on an Office 365 it automatically pops out. But also if we have the team, the Google team, where when we open up, I can see the group using that function. So it's almost like I don't see that group function coming up
From the desktop.
From my Outlook Mac.
Correct. Right. And that's because of licensing versions. UNE currently provides on all UNE provided devices Office 2016 and /2019 is going to be about to be upgraded to 2019. And that tool does not, it lags in some of, then there's the Office 365 tool. And that tool is not the one that we have the current license for. And that tool does have that integration. So if you were to download Office 365, which you can do for free, by the way, does everybody know that you can get Office for free from UNE at home, up to 5 devices? Just for you know, so that you know.
Was it always there or not?
It has always been there. It's if you go, for example, to Office 365, well, you log in online, Office 365, install Office, and whichever device you're on, it'll give you that option. So the default is the Office apps, or you can choose to install specific individual services, Office, Skype for Business, that kind of thing.
So I have a follow-up question though.
Yeah.
So if you put it on an old laptop, right?
Your own personal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do you have to sign or remove it to keep that 5 in check, or is it just it's once it's done kind of?
Once it's installed, you mean?
Yeah.
It's there. So the official statement is that you have access to it as long as you have a UNE account. So it's tied to your UNE account. So as long as you're an active UNE employee or have an active UNE account, you will still have access to those tools. So you can download it. You don't have to connect. When you download it, it'll prompt you to connect to an account so that you can use some of these other features like connecting to groups and teams. But you don't have to do that. You can just use it as a quote-unquote standalone. So it doesn't have to be connected to your work environment. You can connect it to your personal OneDrive or other accounts that way.
So my question was slightly different.
Oh.
Like for example, I have my old phone where I had my Microsoft Outlook that was downloaded, and I switched phones, and I have it on my laptop, I have it on my iPad, whatever, right?
Yep.
So you're saying it's limited to 5 computers, five
5 devices.
5 devices, right?
Mhm.
So do I have to sign out and delete it from that, and that makes the device open for another one?
yes.
Or is it just like because it's already done 5 times, can I go and see where do I have those 5 devices, which one those are active?
Yeah, it's right. Where am I? View subscription? No. I have. Sorry, I'm in my. They just changed this, so it's my account. Oh, detected installs 4. Right. So from this interface, I can see that I've got 4 installs, and yes, if you uninstall it from one of them, it will release it and give you back that one, and so it'll go back to 3. Is that the answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Going back just for my own
Sorry, yep.
clarification on
Yep.
Office 365, so for my older Mac, I have to download the 365 Outlook in order to have the group option.
Mhm.
And would it be a web version or a standalone app if I download the 365 Outlook versus the Office?
Oh,
What is the difference between-
so you can't download just Outlook because it comes as the full Office 365 package from this using this interface. I don't know if there's a separate standalone you get. I believe that has been discontinued, but to get that Office, the version of Office that has that, and I'm saying today. So tomorrow they might add that functionality to the 2016 version, right, or the 2019 version, but they don't have. There's no specific statement that this is coming for that. Office 365, the Office 365 license is the license that Microsoft wants you to have because it's inherently connected to the web and all these other services, but they are continuing to use these others. They are starting to transition some of those out. For example, OneNote. OneNote is being transitioned out as a standalone, and it's becoming, you have to have Windows 10 to have the new version of OneNote, and so it's going to be OneNote for Windows rather than a version of itself. So those kinds of changes are coming, and we're going to be starting to see probably more and more of that.
My last possible question.
Sorry, no, you hit the limit.
So I've not used the Office 365 version of the Word document or any of those things. So if I download that and put that, is it going to be same as that of the regular Office version? Because I have other applications, for instance, EndNote and other applications which are associated with it. I don't want to lose that access by gaining access to a group. So
Right. It depends on each individual add-on that you're using, and you'd have to research that with those add-ons because that's individual to them. Will they integrate with this new thing? The most common answer, without having an official answer for that, the most common answer is Office 365 is where things are going. So all of these tools that you're using should have something for that direction, but I can't say for definitively whether that's true or not. Yeah. Yes.
So can I just delete Microsoft Outlook 2016 from my UNE laptop and re-download 365?
Unfortunately, no. Yeah,
Why not?
because that is the one that's officially supported for our lease for these devices. So if we put on other documentation, other software, and something were to happen, we've contravened our subscription and our policy, so we can be knocked for the whole thing. It's an all or nothing kind of a deal. There's discussions about whether that might be the case, that we switch in all future cases, that we go to Office 365, because that does appear to be the direction that Microsoft is pushing. And it might no longer be an option after 2019, don't know. But for right now, no, you can't remove on a UNE device, you can't swap to the other one. Yeah, sorry. Yes?
If the decision is made to go away from Google, will there be a simple way to download the thousands of files off Google Drive to SharePoint?
Excellent question. So, as an example, technically speaking, the short answer and technically accurate answer to your question is yes. Because by default, downloading any file from Google Drive to a device automatically converts it to its Microsoft equivalent. Done. Just happens automatically. So if I say I want, well, not sites, that's different. But here's a spreadsheet. Let me come into my documents here. Forms. All right. So, what does this one say? I don't know if I have anything. All right, so this has got some dummy stuff in it. At any time, I can choose File, Download, and Microsoft Excel, it'll save it, and it's saving it as an XLSX, so the latest version, and it automatically will open in Microsoft.
I realize that, but I'm just saying, like,
Yep.
in Google Drive right now, we have thousands upon thousands of files. I don't want to have to download every single one to my own computer to put it on SharePoint. What's going to be the way you could transfer things directly?
There is no way to, well, let me take that back. At this time, because there isn't a decision on how that's going to happen, there is no decision about there's no plan for how to make it happen. So a straight conversion from Google to Microsoft, passing all those files from your Google Drive to your Microsoft Drive, it's technically possible. These things are, there's tools that can do it, and you can actually use Microsoft Flow to do it. So technically, we can do it. But what will be the official process? I don't know. The big thing to remember about that is because I just lost my keyboard. I can download a whole folder. I don't have to do it individually. And if I download the whole folder, it'll automatically carry everything that's under it, and it'll convert them automatically by default to the Microsoft equivalents. And then I could upload them up. But as you're right, I have all these millions of files. How do I get them there? And I don't have enough space on my computer. Yes?
The other question I have is because lots of other universities share stuff with us that are on Google Drive.
Mhm.
If we go away from it, are we still not going to have access to it then if they share something that's Google Drive with us?
You won't have a Google UNE Google account. That is correct. Right? So that's if the decision is made to not have a Google account for UNE, then you will not have a Google account for UNE. But if you have a personal Google account, you can connect that way, right? These are the larger questions that are definitely above me. Yes.
It's also based on how they share it. They can share it restricted to Google, they can share it restricted to literally anybody on the web. So it's dependent on the person sharing the file with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I have lots of things shared with me from other people around the world.
But are they sharing it with you from their from inside as a school entity restricted device source, or as individual, right? And Google provides both, right? And that's what makes it kind of
I have no idea.
right. And it's almost impossible to figure out on your own how it's been shared with me and where it is. And that I want to go back to. The point here is the kind of premise that we were starting with was SharePoint and how to get out of the Google experience and into the SharePoint experience. So the big thing is we can get the files and get the files out of the Google experience and into the Microsoft experience, the SharePoint or OneDrive experiences. The question is not can we get the files there, it's the sharing. Because you've shared X amount of things with X amount of people. When you pull it out of Google, those things are not shared with anybody anymore, right? I mean, the things in Google, you download the local copy and you put it up somewhere else, it doesn't know that it used to be friends with other people. So you have to redo all that sharing. And that is the real work here, right? And complicated by the fact that Google allows for every Google file is a unique identifier, that flat experience. So when I go here to this untitled spreadsheet, maybe, oh, this one here, spreadsheets, and this is the unique identifier, right, for that hash to make that unique. There is no folder structure inherent in that file. The folder structure is what I've put on it. I've said it's in this folder, in these folders, whatever. But you can, if I share it with you, organize it in an entirely different folder structure, because that's entirely dependent upon you. And that creates this kind of chaos confusion that I've got it in folder B and you've got it in folder A. So when I say move folder A to folder C, we're both talking about different things, right? And then it's a question of who has ownership of these things. Because we've shared it, now we've got 6 owners. In the Google environment, you can have 1,000 owners, however many owners that you want. In the Microsoft environment, the ownership is strict. One person is the owner. Again, social versus business. There's an audit trail, fixed ownership, so that you can see and manage that. But it creates a very different structure, and especially a migration process. That is a much bigger fish. Something.
Do you go to OneDrive and
OneDrive.
Can you go to OneDrive, create a Word document, and then share it, just to like demonstrate the share?
Sure.
feature?
Sure. Are you on?
Yeah.
Or anyway, all right.
'Cause there's like a weird thing that's shown, I think, in share. It would be nice to know the differences.
Yeah. So there's a number of ways that you can do it. Usually, so you can do it from in the tool here from share. You can do it from here using the arrow out. It's supposed to be the sharing document. So if I do that share, and I can say it can find you, and you have the option. So you, by default, it's with specific people and allows editing, because the implication is that you're working with people and sharing things. So the specific people is the X number of people that you put in. I can say people with existing access. There's reasons for doing that. People with the university, people in University of New England with the link, and then the anyone with the link. The anyone is the asterisk anyone with a Microsoft account. So that's that catch. But I can say, if I share with people, I can not allow editing, and I can block the download, right? So you can provide some of those further level restrictions. I want to be clear about this. Just because I block the download doesn't mean you can't take a screenshot or a phone or anything like that. So there is no 100% security in any of this. But this does limit the tool's use of those things. Yes?
If you block the download, could someone still do like highlight the whole screen, copy paste?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, these things, and this is only for Microsoft tools, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. If you have a PDF, there's no way to do that, because every browser interprets PDF because it's a standard differently. So they display them in their own ways, and the prompt is whether you display them or you download them and things like that. That's one of the reasons that the Box environment was piloted with the HIPAA compliance, because they have extra tools for restricting some of those. Again, though, I can screenshot and I can copy and paste and I can still do these things. So, but anyway, I share, and I like Emily, so I'm going to allow her to do that. I click apply. I can add X number of other people, thing, and click send. So she'll get an email, but even before she gets the email, if she's in OneDrive, she can go to her shared on the left-hand side, and by default shared with me, and popular around me. All right, so they're shared with me, and then they're shared by me. So I can see that was, nope, not that one, not fast. But if I go back to there, and I can see that Emily is editing this in the upper right-hand corner. If you want to go ahead and do so. Get out of my document. So we're seeing her, hey, stop that, right? And then the joy of live collaboration. All your stuff is gone, right? So this is an exaggerated example because live collaboration can be a powerful tool, but you have to remember that using it can open up some confusion for folks. So Emily can continue to go in and edit, make changes, etc. Every time a change is made, as you're making changes, you see this changes from saving to saved, saving to saved as it goes. So as people are making changes, it's gonna make those changes saved, and it saves them as separate revisions. In the Google environment, this is where the UI, the Microsoft experience comes in. The UI for Google is a much more obvious, seeing who changed what, and it shows up on the right-hand side, and you can see those specific items. there's two versions of revisions in Microsoft Online. And the default, which is the one that we're using now, is loose revision, what I refer to as loose revisioning. So it saves as we're going, and as we're making changes, it's going to put in some entries and save revisions. But if 2 people are editing or more people are editing at one time, it picks one to label as the editor of all of those edits at the moment that it made that save. So if I come back over here to my files, and I go to my revision version history, Emily did make a change, Bill made another change, right? So I can see the history, I can see it. I have to go outside and then come back in, so to speak, to see it. So it's not as intuitive, and it isn't necessarily as strict. However, it's not using the track changes level of discrete level of functionality. So you'll notice that the ribbons for these are effectively truncated versions of the ribbons that you would get in the other ones. And what is not here under review is track changes. You can't use track changes on the web, that track changes level of functionality, but you can turn it on in the desktop version of the tool. What that means is if I go to, well, I can do it from here, open in the desktop app. So this is about to get a little bit more confusing, and I apologize, but I want you to know that it exists. We do a full training on just this, and we have one scheduled for later this month. Plug. But once, yes, I have to connect to this. You log in with your do it again.
Are we ever going to get rid of the double login?
That would be something with the Office 365, the integration, because it's built for that. This is the 2016, so it can do it. It wasn't built for it first. Yeah. Yeah, so understood. But it is a one-time deal. So once you've logged in once to your Office suite, doing it like this, and you can see up here I'm logged in, you should never have to log in again. For that there. But as you can see, here I am, and I can
You never have to log in again on that day?
to the device.
Oh.
To the tool on the device. Because every time you log in the morning to your device, it passes that through to the Windows application, Office applications. So here I can see that I'm editing, and eventually Emily is editing. So Emily, if you go ahead and make some changes. This is technically possible, so I'm on my desktop app. What that means is I have 100% access, right, to all of the functionality, all of those tools that are available in Word from the desktop version. I can use them all here, and I can see that Emily's making changes live and in real time. When will it show up? Fairly quickly, but I can see right here it's locked this, so I can't make changes to that because she's in it, and that's the kind of catch between using some on the desktop version and some on the live version. So I can start typing here, but it's not automatically syncing. So she will see this and make those changes, and it will cache back to her. If you're doing live collaboration, it's strongly suggested that you stick to one, either the desktop or the web version, because the gap in between is not so great. Drat. Because I was in the middle of editing. But you will be in about 30 seconds. You will be able to do that. So there's that gap. So this is that kind of weird in-between space. But I'm going to close this file. Resume editing here. So I'm going to pretend that, all right, so she's making these changes. I close this. If I go to Word later, because I'm logged in, it will see that I was doing the document on my OneDrive. Similarly, I can open other documents, and if I click that, I will see my entire OneDrive eventually. And I can go in and make those changes and open them directly. I don't have to go to the cloud to get to the cloud because I've now logged in. Similarly, if I have access to different SharePoint sites, I'll have access to those and be able to go in that way. So you don't actually have to use the cloud, go to the cloud to access the cloud, which is this kind of weird in-between hybrid that Microsoft has had to do because because there's a desktop app and a web app. It has to make the gap between them. Yes. Sorry.
So it seems like so far now. The Google SharePoint is nothing better than, Microsoft SharePoint is really nothing better than Google at this point, what I feel. Second part is, if this change, let's say if we make this change is, it seems like there's no problem if we use it internally. But I followed by Wallace's comment. If right now I'm going to cooperate research with someone in Texas, but we all know that Google Drive is way more popular in the US or in the world. I mean, it seems like if we switch to SharePoint, it make a disconnect. I'm no longer can using the Google Drive function, right, to cooperate with someone who is far away from here.
Well, you can share content with people outside. They just have to have a Microsoft account.
Yes, that's the point, right?
No, I get where you're coming from,
So
but I can only say I don't make the decisions, so I can say that.
Okay.
And if you can feel free to talk to my boss is Eric Kuntz. He'd be happy to talk some more about that. Ryan Conant, CEO, CIO, not Ryan Conant. Craig Loftus, sorry. But the university has decided that they're going to go with Microsoft, right? That's been the decision. That's the only thing that I can say is that was the decision that was made. So I am showing you what the options are for that. The functionality for this tool, it doesn't have to stop that other sharing, but it does require a separate process. Yes. Yep. When you said SharePoint is no better than Google Drive, I just want to, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive is the same as Google Drive. So this is a kind of a semantic thing. It feels like a semantic thing, but it's not really. OneDrive is a file repository, and that's all it really is. And Google Drive is the same thing. You can edit the files, the Word, Excel, Docs, Sheets, whatever, same thing. But SharePoint is a intranet. So it has web pages, it has lists, it has forms, it has a bunch of other tools that are associated with it. So I think what you were saying is Google Drive is the same as OneDrive, which is true. But the SharePoint sites, which is a different thing, is an intranet for the university, is a different animal. So SharePoint sites is intended as intranets. There isn't an official UNE intranet. There's no front door to the UNE intranet because there isn't one. Various departments, College of Medicine has undergone an example of that. If I go to SharePoint, and then I go to Teams College of Medicine has taken each of its functional areas, has its own SharePoint subsite, etc. The research, there we go. The students for RSAS have access to this, and you give access, and it's that role-based, so that when you onboard a new person comes into the university, is made a part of your department, you add them to the SharePoint site, they immediately have access to all of the files and content and other things there. Another thing about files repository. So at UNE we have 3 network drives by default, H, U, and V drives. H is your personal drive, U is your department/college drive, and V is the everybody can see, but most people can only view. So you can't add stuff there, but you download forms from the business office and HR and things like that. The parallels in the Microsoft environment are H, the personal drive, is like your OneDrive. The U drive is like a SharePoint site / groups or teams, depending on how you use it. And then the V drive, the external to internal audiences, view only, can be also the SharePoint sites, so that you would create that content so that other people who you want to share within the university can see the content but cannot edit it. Okay. Yes, questions? Who wants lunch? Yeah.
I didn't understand what you just said, and what I would like is a place where we can use as a repository for all of our own internal documents, but it sounds like university, we're moving away from Google, or we're moving to, so we need a separate education just on that. I've got to leave.
No, yeah.
But I didn't understand what you just said in the last 60 seconds.
Okay.
And so I would need more in-depth.
So we actually have another training, several trainings on that, but we can also do scheduled, but I can also do another sit-in for individuals or small groups. But yes, that is what the SharePoint, what you're looking for, is a local repository for you to have access. Kind of like your U drive now, but more accessible. That's what a SharePoint site could do for you. But it means that everybody needs to kind of be on the same page about what that means and how to use it. So yeah, that is a longer process. Yeah.
Do we
know?
know?
Sorry. You got to wait.
Quick question about this. So I think Mac's idealized goal looks something very similar to this. So just from a project standpoint, can you give us a little bit of maybe detail on the amount of resources needed for COM to make this build and the duration of time it took for them to build this?
Well, I would strongly suggest you talk to Lori Brittle. She's the one of the key, Lori Brittle. She is one of the key folks that can do that, and I can also point you to Mary Fraser, Student Academic Success Center. Full disclosure, she's my wife, so okay. But I did not build that site. Yes, she asked questions, but she built it. The main point of this, and who else? College of Graduate and Professional Studies. Carolyn Zimbo would be a contact person there to talk about that. Generally speaking, functionally, getting the content from one place to another is the easiest part. It's the structure and everybody understanding how this is what we're going to be using now and this is how we're going to be using it. And that's what takes up the time. So generally speaking, what we've seen so far is regardless of the size of the site, whether it's SASE, which is a very discrete thing, or COM, which is a very large thing, about a year from to get even this far. And this is not fully built out yet. But setting up the structures and aligning how you do things. All right, this is the way we used to do it in Google. How do we make it happen over here? Because there are a number of additional caveats in all of these things. Internal links between files change and things like that. But it's setting up the structure, and we can provide the training for that, but that's on you folks to provide the actual implementation thereof. Yes?
Do you have a timeline for when the university administration is going to be switching to SharePoint?
Nope. Sorry.
Last question. Do you,
Yeah.
for instance, lots of work has been done on this one. Can you do like SharePoint copies or like begin to like formulate blank templates of basically you have like various use cases for SharePoint, and do they have just like template builds that are there? Because I found
You're specifically asking ITS when you say you, right?
yeah,
Because
and or like can you download a template?
so they come with some, when you create a new site, it comes with what's called a communication template. There's some others that are available. The communication template is the one that looks like this, or actually let me just, sites, SASE. The visual heavy, using the headers, the hero things, the embedded videos, things like that. The functionality for creating new content in SharePoint has significantly improved over the last 6 to 12 months. So it's much easier to create the content, but the catch that I always warn folks of is not to just start building, but to really do the planning ahead of time. And that's storyboarding, that's planning, that's stickers, that's that gritty of how do we want to organize the structure so that we don't end up building it and rebuilding it, rebuilding it, rebuilding it, and rebuilding it. But ITS does not provide that. I can provide, I'm the current sole contact for this at UNE. So I'd be happy to share some insights, but I also strongly suggest you connect with some of the other folks, and I'd be happy to connect you with some more about how that works and what the realities are for internal resources, because UNE is not, UNE's ITS does not provide development support. Like I said, I can provide the training on how do you create a page, how do you create a list, but managing it and supporting it and maintaining it is something for individuals or departments to take on, for better and for worse. Yes?
Does COM have every single department on SharePoint or just this one department?
No, they have all of their functional areas. Well, let me take it back. They have separated functional areas, but some of them are of different, this SASE, some of them have different levels of they're up to date or not. So they started in summer last, not this past summer, the summer before, to get a functional structure in place. And so they have the functional structure in place, and they have the place where people are creating content or organizing that content. But individual departments have taken it on because they've created separate leads for those individual functional areas. It's a much bigger organization than yours, so it's a slightly different apples and oranges kind of a thing. Student Academic Success Center and CGPS might be a little bit more in line with your scope to say how we did it and how they organized it and structured it. Yep. No, sorry, you said that was your last one.
I know, but is the functionality available to make a duplicate copy of the site?
So technically it's possible. Microsoft continues to improve it. It's currently a back-end administration. You can't duplicate a site. You can request it be duplicated, and we can do that, but it's not a click thing. It's technically possible, but it is not an easy functionality right now. Yeah.
I just want to copy.
Copy.
Put it out
Copy.
there. Let's just
Well,
copy copies
I'll
and
tell you
put
this,
it on it.
creating
Right?
comms structure, just the actual creation of it will take maybe a half a day. Really. Right? 'Cause creating these sites and or connecting them together in the new hub sites functionality, very, very simple. That process, the creation process is not the problem. It's the organizational structure of, all right, in that, how are our libraries going to look? What is our content going to look like? Where, who's got access to what? To your point of, I've got access to X number of files, millions of files. So who owns that file? Right now, in Google, any number of people can own it. In Microsoft, one person or location has to own it. So somebody has to make those decisions about those things. So you can't, even if you could download everything from Google, which you may be able to, is it all yours as owner? Or is it a bunch of other people's as owners? And we got to distinguish that. So those are that's the hard part in my experience. The other hard part is knowing when to stop playing. Because once you start playing with the website and you start, oh, I can do this, no, I can do, oh, wait, I have a day job, right? So there's that. But that's a good place to be, right?
All right, I think,
Thank you.
Bill. This was a productive session.
Cool.
We didn't even have enough time to